To be home at Central this morning. And we look forward to sharing with you some of the ways that God is moving on the Eurasia region and changing lives. But before I get started, I really need to stop and say thank you for your involvement in our lives and your involvement in missions. I know Central is a church that cares about God's mission. And I just want to say thank you for your involvement through the years. The Church of the Nazarene, we have a wonderful blessing by being part of a global denomination where we can all work together, contributing into the World Evangelism Fund so that the mission can go on around the world. And you're a part of that. I'd like to share some quick information with you on what you're a part of, the Church of the Nazarene. More than 2.2 million members now in 159 world areas. 687 missionaries deployed from 27 world areas. We truly are an international church. I grew up thinking, missionaries come from the United States, Canada, but we are sending missionaries from 27 different world areas, and many times those missionaries from other places can go places that we can't. So that's exciting. 29,000 churches, Bible colleges, seminaries, universities, clinics, hospitals, compassionate ministry centers where we're reaching out to the needs of people around us. You can see how the church is growing faster and faster. And on average, today, 569 people accept Christ each day because of a ministry of the Church of the Nazarene somewhere in the world. That's exciting to be a part of. And we thank you for your involvement in that. We see the church is growing. We see God moving like he did in the book of Acts, sometimes in places where we just never imagined that God was going to be able to open doors. One of those areas is Bangladesh. We started work there just a little over 20 years ago, and that began with an investment of $10,000 annual investment into that country and two gentlemen beginning the work. I know Central was giving to missions 20 years ago because I was here, and I was a part of that. And I look at our investment, and I can't believe how God has taken that and used it. And I want you to think, as you're involved in missions giving today, where we're planting the seed, what we're investing in. And 20 years down the road, we may be looking back and going, wow, see what God was able to do with what little we gave. And it's just exciting to see what's happening. Thinking about Bangladesh, there's one other thing I wanted to share. The growth there has been so fast. They just recently divided the district there into 3 separate districts. And each one of those districts is self-supporting. And they give back into World Evangelism Fund. So it doesn't matter where in the world we are. We're part of a big organization doing things and changing lives for God. And your involvement through personal involvement like work and witness, prayer, and giving has made it where all of this can happen. And many exciting things are going on. We can't wait to see what's happening in the future. And along with, as we see how the church is growing, there are some challenges that brings up. One of those challenges that we face is training our pastors and leaders for a growing church. And that's an area that I get to be involved in. And I'm not a preacher, I'm not a teacher or a theologian. It'll become painfully obvious as we go through that I'm obviously not a preacher. I stand in awe of those people that can do that. But God has gifted me instead in the area of technology. And you know from your daily life how technology is just becoming more predominant in everything that we do. You look around this room, you think of ministry, and in technology we've got projectors, we've got lights, we've got sound. And when technology doesn't work, things get harder to do. Ministry gets harder to fulfill. And so it's not an area that I really expected to hear about in missions. I didn't expect to become a missionary. I grew up thinking that missionaries were preachers and teachers and doctors. But I've always tried to listen to what God's been talking to me about and to be willing to respond in whatever way he asked me to serve. And so he's given me the opportunity to be able to take the gifts that he's given me and use them to build his kingdom. I'd like to take you on a little bit of a tour of what my work is like. It's going to be a little bit like the World Wide Web with one thing linking to another, and we're going to kind of bounce all over because that's kind of how my day goes. First of all, I take care of the computer systems and network systems for the Eurasia Regional Office. How many of you here have a computer? How many have ever had a problem with that computer? All right, well, missionaries and leaders, their computers behave the same way. So I get the privilege of being the one that they call and say, it's not working again. And I love it when I can get to go help somebody and solve a problem for them, when I can help them work a little more efficiently. It's not the type of work that we typically think of as missionary work, but there are a lot of jobs that have to be done to keep our missionaries, our leaders, being productive in the areas that God has gifted them. So I'm thankful for being able to use those skills as we all work together to fulfill the Great Commission. I mentioned earlier I get to be involved with training pastors and leaders. Another part of my job is working with European Nazarene College. It's a school that's gone through a lot of changes in the past few years. It used to be very much a normal educational institution. Everybody came on campus to study and learn in the one location there in Busingen, Germany. It's gone through a lot of changes, and at most, in the old model, we were able to serve about 50, at most train 60 people at a time. But now, with a very distributed system, we have more than 180 students studying in 15 learning centers. Those learning centers serve 17 countries with 41 teaching locations throughout Europe. This allows students to study where they're at. They're already involved in ministry. They're able to learn many times in their own language. With the old system, they had to learn English because all of the teaching was done in English. So the learning centers operate with local teachers. They also work with online courses. Courses taught through video conference, so it doesn't matter where the teacher is at or where the class is being held. We can bring them together. I'd like to tell you about a recent class that was held in Armenia. I had a group of students in Armenia, and the teacher was in Germany, and he speaks German, Dutch, and English, but not Armenian, and they didn't speak any of those, but there was a lady in another city in Armenia that could serve as a translator. So they would all get together in a video conference space. He would teach, she would translate, they would ask their questions back and forth. And so those students were able to take a class and learn things that they needed to know to improve their ministry, even though they were not in a place where that teacher was available. Video conference also allows us to work in situations where it's difficult to go physically. I know you've probably heard about the situation in Ukraine. EUNC has got some things going on in Ukraine, and they had some meetings planned, and it's just not really a good idea to go there physically at this point. But we're continuing those efforts through video conference, and the technology gives us the opportunity to not let these kind of situations slow us down. We have to understand that changing political situations, closed borders, they're going to be a fact of life on our region and in many parts of the world. But through using technology, we're able to get through those borders. We're able to work around those situations and still let ministry continue. We've got students from the Middle East and even places in Asia that are taking classes at Nazarene Theological College in Manchester, England. And thinking of Manchester, England, they are also connected up with our Nazarene Theological College in Brisbane, Australia. They are sharing professors and classes back and forth between their two programs. So we take our strongest professors, we put them into the classes no matter where they're at. It's that great kind of partnership that's possible because of the investments that the church has made in technology. I brought up Australia. That's obviously not the Eurasia region. But even though I work and live in Eurasia, we have global systems that reach around the world. And they take us places sometimes that I never expect that they will get used. I need to tell you about a story of a gentleman that emailed me from Australia. He's a Korean missionary working in Australia with Aboriginal people groups. And he said, I'd like to get an account on the video conference system to work with pastors I'm trying to mentor and train, and the distances are so big, I can't get with them often. So if we could use the video conference system, that would really help. I said, well, you're going to need a good internet connection, and I'm not sure if that's available in some of these remote locations. He said, oh, we'll work on that. I don't think it'll be a problem. So we set it up, let him try it. A little over a month ago, I got another email from him. He said, I need more accounts. I'm working with more pastors, and I need to be connected more places. He sent me a picture that shows how, working from Perth, Australia, he is connected with many, many sites on the western side of Australia. Also shows his connection to the Nazarene Theological College in Brisbane. It is exciting to me to be able to help a missionary work with people across hundreds of miles. It doesn't matter what kind of conditions, how far apart they are. We're helping him be effective as he tries to train and develop leaders. As you can see, the technology gives us to work anywhere in the world. I'm privileged with working with a team of gentlemen in Idaho, gentlemen in Manila, Philippines, and we've got a group of volunteers that are also spread around the world. So we're kind of able to work around the clock to keep the systems working, to keep people's needs met. We try to support schools wherever they're at. We work with schools pretty much in every part of the world, including the U.S. and Canada. Nazarene Theological Seminary here in Kansas City makes use of our systems. We get a chance to work with Stephen Porter, member here at Central, good member of our team, and it's exciting to be able to serve all around the world. But as we become more connected with the schools around the world, we've discovered that many of them have some challenges being able to make use of the new technologies and the new resources that are available, because they're struggling with old infrastructure, systems that just don't work as well as they need to. They don't necessarily have staff who knows how to manage that and help run it. So we have started putting together what we affectionately call geek work and witness teams. And we'll get together with a school and start talking about their needs, figure out how we can help them, then go to our list of people that have said, I want to be a part of a geek work and witness team. And we find people whose skills match the needs. They'll go and spend a week or two helping to improve the situation there, helping to train some people, and also getting familiar with the system so that even when they're back home, they can help continue to support the systems there. So far, we've taken about 6 trips to 6 different schools. We try to do about 3 to 4 trips a year. So if you are involved in technology and are interested in being a part of one of those trips, get in touch with me. If your method of tech support is smack it upside and hope it works, there are ways you can be involved too. Different ways. Prayer support, possible financial support for equipment and travel. So there's ways that you can be involved no matter what your tech skills are. So although I'm not a gifted teacher, I thank God for the opportunity to help play a part in developing new pastors, new leaders around the world. They're able to learn where they serve, whether they're in the cities or tiny, isolated communities. But they're reaching out from wherever they are with God's love to the community around them and making a difference. Now, I have to be careful. I can go on, and I start talking about things like ESXi and NASAs and VPNs and SMTP and firewalls and all that kind of stuff that would bring normal people to tears. But I will get out of the way and let Nancy share with you. If any of that made sense to you, come and talk with me afterward.
Aren't we glad that God gifts us in such different ways? I'm grateful for Brad. I'm glad he's around so that I don't keep hitting my computer. I think God has blessed people like Brad with a certain aura. Do you know what I'm talking about? Your computer is messing up. They walk by. It's fine. It happens to me all the time. I'm not sure how that happens, but he is gifted in that way. I'm also glad that God helps us find where we fit. And with my role in personnel, I get to be a part of that for many of our people that we're working with and developing on the region. I also work to support our missionaries. We have 98 missionaries on our region with 47 children. And we resource them in many ways. Simply, sometimes it's with education, which has changed a lot in the last 5 years. Online opportunities has made that so different and made so much more available to them. We try to keep up with what's available and keep them in touch. We also are involved in things like security and safety. You think of Ukraine and the situation there. We do everything possible to ensure our missionaries are in a safe situation at all times and be prepared to take action if something happens. So just know that our missionaries in Kiev, in Ukraine, are safe and they are being cared for, and we're sometimes in contact with them daily just to know how their situation is changing and what we might need to do. But more recently, I've been involved with a task force or team of people who are going to concentrate on what we call mobilization. That's getting our people from our region involved more closely in mission. By nature, I'm a developer of people. I love to see them encouraged to do what God is asking them to do and leading them to do. The youth on our region are responding in a great way. As God speaks to them, they're wanting to find out, what do we do next? In Western Europe and the UK, they've been sending missionaries for decades. They know what that's about, and they do it well. But we face challenges when we start looking at Central Europe, where some of our churches are very small, districts are even very small. Supporting a missionary on their own becomes a challenge. It's even more challenging in places like India, where the economy and the economic situation has a big effect. But when they gather in events like this at a Nazarene youth conference, they're talking about how God is speaking to them and what they would like to do and where they would like to see their people reach. We know God is talking to them, and we ask for your support, your prayer support, that we will be directed to the people God would have us connect with so that they can be developed, they can be trained, they can be nurtured and sent out. In the back at the little table I have a sign-up sheet, and if you'd be willing to sign up for one day during the month to pray for us, I'd love to have your name there, and we'll keep in touch with you as well. On the Eurasia region, we've also been focused the past few years on another emphasis we called the power of one. It was focusing on one church, one mission, one Lord. But while those things aren't quite as important, what we call it, what came out of it was important and is important. And we began to see people challenged to be a truly missional church where they were, to get out into the neighborhood, to find out what the needs were, and be God's disciple right where they were. Missional living is taking hold there, and we're seeing growth, new small groups in places that have reported no growth for a number of years. And as they do that, we're learning from them as well. They're asking for things. They're asking for materials, for tools, for guidance, and they're asking about discipleship. In fact, in a recent conference we had on the region, the speaker spoke to that specifically, about discipleship. And he shared two simple questions. I liked that, 2 things. I can remember 2 things. So if you have a pencil or you want to jot them down or put something in your phone as a reminder, here are the 2 questions he shared with us. What is God talking to you about? And what are you going to do about it? First question, what is God talking to you about? Pretty simple. I know I can come up with a couple of things pretty quickly. And that question can be easy to answer. And as I work with personnel, my prayer is that God is speaking to people about serving Him. But I wanted to introduce you to someone on our region that has gotten this all figured out quite well. Let me introduce you to Jana. Jana's story starts as a high school student. She was the president of a club. It was the Young Communists Club, not where you go to look for disciples typically. But that was where she felt she needed to be and where her life was headed. She had a very devout Christian grandmother, a woman who in that society went to jail twice because of her beliefs. And as her grandmother would talk to her at times, Jana came to her and said, you know what, there are 3 things I am never going to do. 1, I am never going to be a Christian. God kind of took care of that in 2001. 2, I am never going to be a pastor. The Nazarene Church helped her with that in 2012, and Jana is the only ordained elder in the District of Bulgaria at this time. Number 3, she would never leave the comfort of the city of Sofia. She was going to college. She was going to become a chemical engineer. She's very bright. But she was going to be comfortable in that life that it afforded. I have to admit, God called her to a ministry I would call anything but comfortable. In 2007, she began to work several hours outside of the city in a rural area among the Roma gypsy people. Now, as a side note, I would just suggest that you never say never to God. Jonah, Jana, good examples. But as she began to live and work among the people there, she gained their trust. She gained their respect. They knew she was a woman of her word. That as she went to the government and the city to ask about things that they needed to help them better their life and their situation, she would make it happen. But as God does, he began to talk to her about some new things. And he began to ask her to just pray for people. Ask that question, how can I pray for you? She'd figured out this first question, what is God talking to you about? And she knew she had to listen. And she knew she needed to pay attention to what he was saying. Listening to God is just part of who Jana is. It's why she ended up in this community in the first place. But then there comes that second question. Question 1, what is God talking to you about? Question 2, what are you going to do? Sometimes that's not so easy to answer. I know it's not for me. But as I go back to Jana and her story, he was talking to her about praying and praying for people specifically. And she began to mention this in every conversation she had. People knew she was going to end it with that phrase. One afternoon she was in town. She happened to pass a woman and a man who had visited the church a few times and began to talk to them. And as she had become accustomed to doing, she said, is there anything I can be praying about for you? The man, I'll call him Ivan, had been quiet, but at that point he spoke up. And he said, would you come by and pray for our business, that it would be successful? And she's like, sure, if that can help, I'll do it. So they set a time, and later in the week she showed up at the address, and Ivan and his wife warmly welcomed her and kind of nervously said, we were a little afraid you wouldn't show up. That sounded odd to her. Of course she would show up. But as she looked around the room, she began to understand why. Along one side, there was a bar, a few tables, and disturbingly, a list on the wall of services the women in this business could provide. She was shocked. She's like, Lord, are you kidding me? I can't pray for this to be successful. What are you doing? I mean, what would you do? I didn't know what I would do. As she shared the story, I listened and watched her mind as it was trying to reconcile what God was asking her to do and the situation she found herself in. She began to keep talking to Ivan about his life, his dreams, what he wanted to do. And you know what she found out? Ivan wanted to raise sheep. She's like, okay. Well, she said, you know what? There's my answer, Lord. Thank you. Ivan, let's pray together that God will help this dream become a reality, that you can someday raise sheep. Well, as God will have it, they continued to talk, and they continued to dream about what could happen. And I don't know really how much time passed in between, but Ivan came to her one day excited because he had done it. He had money, and he could buy a piece of land. Didn't know much about raising sheep, but at least he had the land. He was committed to this. He wanted to see it happen. And so Jana began to work with him and contact Compassionate Ministries. How many out there have ever given money so that people can have goats or sheep or cows to help them out? Well, that's what was happening through Compassionate Ministries. That's where some sheep came from. Jana has discipleship figured out. Even when God throws you a curveball, he wants us to be willing to do something. And if she had answered this first question, what is God talking to you about, with just good intentions, where would Ivan and his wife be today? She listened, she heard, and she obeyed. Now today, Ivan and his wife are out of the human trafficking business. And as you can imagine, his old associates aren't happy about that. On more than one occasion, they have visited him and tried to persuade him to return. But Ivan and his wife are happy. They're raising sheep. They're doing well. And Ivan has what he says in his own words is a respectable living. They continue now in the church, and they too are learning to listen to what God is asking them to do and grow in discipleship. Why is a missionary up here talking about discipleship? It plays a huge role in what I do with personnel. God is speaking to people. He's speaking to people in this room right now, couples, families, students, retirees. Maybe he's talking to you simply about a class to take or a ministry to jump into or how to help with your resources. I don't know. But he's also talking to the people on our region, and he's calling them to be missionaries. We're passionate about seeing them come from everywhere to everywhere, and won't happen without them listening to God, hearing what he has to say, and obeying. Takes us back to those two questions. What is God talking to you about? Talk to him. He wants to hear from you. And simply, what will you do?